The Fletch cast. It's genetics.
Hello, welcome, club members. It's nice to see you again. I've been thinking about you, the go-to phrase. I'm Michael Fletcher, and this is the Fletch cast. Welcome. We're going to cover some things today, but first, we have club member Mark, and I have decided that we are giving, what are we giving away for liking and subscribing?
We're getting vaccine fast passes.
Vaccine fast passes, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you get. We don't want to say that we take care of you, but so we've given you pardons, and now, freaking presidential pardons, not any, Governor Newsom pardons, flat out presidential pardons for liking and subscribing, and now we're giving you vaccine fast passes, which lots of people don't even know exist, but they do. Mark's the expert on it, and so that's it. But by the way, we're almost at 2,000 subscribers, Marky.
Yeah, we're getting there.
It's not bad, not bad. It's we've kind of locked up all the fat, kind of overweight, middle-aged interracial dudes, so we need to expand that base some. So that's our funny part for the day. But like and subscribe, I really do appreciate it. We're doing some cool stuff. I'm utterly convinced that this podcast has legs. I think we're talking about stuff that really matters. Today, although I promised you last week that we would do something funny, this is kind of funny. It's funny in a pathetic, sad way. I'm a lawyer. 15 years ago, my license was suspended because two federal judges claimed that I had filed 17 lawsuits against Honeywell, and that those lawsuits made false statements and all this horrible, egregious stuff. And they said, you did this, this, and this. And then my lawyer pointed out to them, oh, by the way, Michael didn't file a single one of those complaints. Those were all filed by two Caucasian of counsel attorneys. But they said, that's okay. We're just going to keep going anyway. They spent $1 million investigating me for a year, literally could not get a single person to come forward and say I'd ever done anything wrong. It was funny. They had offered me a chance to, they said, if you'll just resign from the federal court, we'll let you practice in state court. And I came back and said, no, I've done nothing wrong. And that was either the best or the worst decision of my life, but I'm happy with it. I did what I just refused to allow them to portray me in a way that wasn't true. And if I or if I at least agreed to their agreement, then I would be saying I'd done something wrong. And I had done nothing wrong. In fact, one of the reasons I was a lawyer, one of the reasons I had an immense firm, one of the reasons we did everything the best was because I was adamant that people of color, people who are disaffected, 100% adamant that we had to have highly competent counsel. The importance of a lawyer cannot be overstated. If you do not have a lawyer, you are literally beholden to whatever the state wants to do. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Shakespeare, Henry VI, and he says, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Now, there's a bunch of people in the world who thinks that that's attack against lawyers. They think it's a belittling of lawyers. The truth is what Shakespeare meant by that is that if you wanted to deny people their rights, if you wanted to basically give them no defense, you take their lawyers. This has been clear from day one. It is true as can be. And one of the things we're going to talk more about on this podcast is that not only is it in Shakespeare, it's also it radiates into our everyday life. It's not just criminal law. The worst is family court. I think it was the Wall Street Journal did a piece, and it said that if a husband and wife, whatever, going for a divorce, and they have $100,000 of marital assets, meaning assets free and clear acquired during the marriage, that the likelihood of them leaving with more than $10,000 in assets after the divorce, zero. This system, the justice system in America, yes, it's designed to use racism as Michelle Alexander in her great book, the new Jim Crow, which was one of the most powerful books I've ever read, talked about the use of courts and the use of the police system to ostensibly limit people of color's access, limit our power, limit what we can do. That is 100% true, but that is true. What other people don't understand is, and that is just it's a tool for racial control. What other people don't understand and what lots of people miss is that it doesn't just stop there. It's not just people of color. The family law court system, the divorce court system in America is appalling. It is absolutely appalling. You will get gutted by the lawyers. And when you get into the system, it's even worse. Because what happens in family law is you have family law courts, and then you have family law lawyers, and there's a whole system that's in place to support the courts, the lawyers. They have family law attorneys who are appointed to represent the kids. They have people who go in and assess the homes, and they do all of this, and it's all set up to extort money from you. And this is what people don't understand. There's what's called a certified family lawyer or something like that in LA. Their hourly rate, a certified family law lawyer, their hourly rate is like $1,200 an hour. I have tried 32 jury trials. I've won millions of dollars in verdicts. Family law lawyers, and this is the absolute truth, are the worst lawyers practicing. The worst lawyers practicing. And yet they are being paid $1,000 an hour, $1,200 an hour, $600 an hour. It literally guts entire families, and the courts allow it to happen. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to bring some guests on, and you'll see. It's bizarre. I got divorced. I had a prenuptial agreement, prior custody agreement. I dropped of my own money $250,000 on lawyers, and I'm a lawyer. I could represent myself at least. My brother, who's a lawyer, ended up helping me. It was appalling. We had a judge. I mean, this is how bad it is. We had a judge who I pointed out, well, we have a prenuptial agreement. This is all done. And he says, well, how would we know if the prenuptial agreement applies if we don't have a trial? God is my witness. I said, well, that would kind of make no sense to have a prenuptial agreement. Did 10 days of trial, just an absolute nightmare. These judges allow regular people to be run over, and we're going to give story after story in family law court where it's appalling. And the best example of this, I was in court, and there was a Caucasian dude representing himself, and it was a custody thing. They wanted to change his custody. And he had two daughters, and the judge, who was female, and the kids, or the wife's lawyer was female, the wife was female, and they had a court-appointed some ombudsman or someone who was going to come in and say who was entitled to what. And I always tell people, when I feel bad for an LA County cop, you know how bad it was. And I'm sitting there. I mean, it was. I'm sitting there, and this dude he's doing great. And he's saying, and what they're trying to do is give him, I think it was 3 days, so they wanted to give him 2 days. And so the guy is cross-examining the court-appointed expert, and he's killing her, and he's doing nothing other than pointing out facts. So they came and did an assessment, and the assessment decided that I should continue to have custody. Yes, yes, yes. And then the judge kept interrupting him, and the judge says to him once, she says, sir, we're trying to help you. And the cop looks at her and says, you're helping me. He says, you're trying to give me less time with my children. And she says, but it's really more time. And so, and I'm messing this up a little bit, but this is profound. This is like 6 years ago. So they take a break, and we come back at lunch, and God is my witness. I come up, and the poor guy is sitting there just head down like this, and he's talking to his wife, and he's saying 2 days is not more than 3. And I sat next to him, and I said, you, this is tough. And he goes, yeah, but 2 is not more than 3. And I said, 2 is not more than 3. And that's how bad it was. And the basis for them giving him less time was he was a homicide detective. I think it was for LAPD. And he sometimes had to go out and investigate not traffic incidents, not trespassing, homicides, murders. And they were using that against him to take time away from his daughter, irrespective of the evidence. It was appalling. And the reason he was representing himself is he had spent all his money. Yeah. All his money. It's we're going to talk a lot about it, and it's important. Today we're going to meet with our first legal guest is a young brother named Jai Pearson Lynn. Jai is, I want to say he's very, he believes in the truth of things. He's very, that this system works. He believes it makes sense. He's one of these young brothers, young kids who really believe in the system. I tell people every day, if you believe the American justice system is fair, you're just naive beyond belief or just stupid, because it's not. You're going to see, and we're going to talk about this at length, that, for example, if you are Latino and you want to hire a Latino lawyer to represent you, it's almost impossible. Almost impossible. In LA, in major metropolitan areas, I know LA more than anything, there are ostensibly 1 or 2 criminal lawyers who are Latino who can actually try cases. If you're African American, it's almost 0. This isn't a mistake. There is, and I've seen it. I just say this, I tried Case on Court TV. I know what I'm talking about. If you are competent and you are of color, and unless you're willing to go along with the powers that be, the Bar Association is going to come after you. The police will come after you. The prosecutors will come after you. We see it every single day. And we're going to talk about it because it's amazing. Jai is, again, great young man, comes from a great family, well-educated. He comes to court. What'll happen a lot of times in a criminal docket, you'll just show up and say, hey, I want to continue this trial or this hearing to another day. And what they'll do is say, that's great. And Jai showed up to court, and he had just on jeans, and he had an African garb on. And you'll see the video. We'll play it for you. He walks over and he's talking to the clerk, and he's just explaining, hey, I'm here, but I want to carry this over. Caucasian sheriff's department person ends up pushing him back, shoving him. It's on video. They take him outside and taser him, and then they charge him with interfering delaying a protection, a law enforcement protection person, destroy the law. I mean, they charge him with delaying a law enforcement officer or something like that. This is stunning, but it's not surprising in any way, shape, or form, because that's what they do. That's what they do. The way they try to get away with things is they portray what happened and they suggest that it's something extraordinarily different. Lawyers show up to court in shorts every day, flip-flops every day. They attack Jai because they say, this is great, this is from the police report, they say he wasn't dressed like a lawyer. And then the other court staff says he was dressed like a defendant. This is stuff that goes on every single day. This young brother, they charged him with a crime. He went and had a jury trial, and you'll find this hard to believe, there wasn't a single African American on his jury. And this all-white jury came back and said that he had interfered with this officer. What's crazy is one of the jurors wrote him a letter saying, I felt this was railroaded. I didn't think you were guilty, but there wasn't much I could do about it. The point is that this is the courts allowing African-American and Latino lawyers to be trashed. And it goes on and on and on. It is, he was guilty of, quote, delaying and or obstructing a peace officer in January of 2019. They sentenced him to a year of probation, and now they're going to try and take his law license because he showed up in court dressed casually on his day off just to continue a hearing. Happens every single day. In exchange for showing up to continue his hearing, he gets tasered, arrested, demeaned, and rebuked because that's what the system allows. The judges allow this. The courts allow it. The bar department allows it. The police department allows it. They trash you. You cannot be a person of color. You cannot be a person of color who fights for minority rights because they will come after you. I know that of which I speak. Not only did I have to suffer through this, it is lawyer after lawyer after lawyer. A great example is Mark Garagos. Now, let me first say this. Jaye was sentenced to a year probation, and here's the sentencing report. He was, quote, aggressive, quote, agitated, and didn't appear to be an attorney. One judicial assistant told investigators he was dressed like a defendant. There it was. It's like, there you go.
I'd be pretty aggravated if I got tased for coming to work.
And did nothing. He's literally standing there. They're grabbing him. He's just saying, hey, I'm just trying to continue this hearing. And I'm telling you, happens every single day. Doesn't matter for them. And for clarity, in case you think that maybe I'm being a little dramatic about this, for the year probation Jaye received, that is a year sentence longer than the person who strangled Eric Garner to death. You remember this. This is a New York cop, goes behind him, strangles him to death on video. He did not get a year probation. It's a year probation longer than the Caucasian officer who shot Tamir Rice in the back while he was on a swing. That officer did not get a year probation. Jacob Blake, you remember Jacob Blake? This was this horrible person who was an obvious threat because he was getting into the car where his children were. And as we all know now, he was a threat because he got out of his car to stop a fight. He gets back in his car. The Caucasian officer grabs him by his shirt, shoots him, boom, 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 7 times in the back. That Caucasian officer, stunningly, did not get a year of probation. And we're going to cover this one, is Andres Guardado. Why can't I talk? Andres Guardado. We're going to edit that out. Andres Guardado. This is one that is close to home, and it's another one of the reasons I did this podcast, is Andreas was an 18-year-old security guard who was shot 5 times in the back by the LA County Sheriff's Department in Compton. And when you see the bullet pattern on his back, and I've had an expert look at this, and he says it is impossible for that kid to have been shot in the back if he's moving because the shots are just perfect in his back. Andreas, they've announced they're going to do an investigation, like the first time ever, a coroner's inquest. This kid was, he was shot in the back 5 times. They're actually investigating. I think it was his sisters or his aunts, and we're going to get them on because they were talking about he was a good kid. I'm not laughing, but I am laughing. One of the reasons they gave for shooting him was he was running away. So if you're an 18-year-old Latino kid, he was a security guard, and you run away, they can shoot you in the back and kill you 5 times. No one's been charged with a misdemeanor. No one's been charged with a year on probation. There is a absolute fundamental disconnect between what happens to minorities and what happens to police who kill minorities. It's horrible. I guess on a brighter point at some level, the good news is that they're also willing to attack Caucasian lawyers who go to bat for people of color, who go to bat for people who are less advantaged. One of the last famous criminal defense lawyers in town is Mark Garagos. Mark Garagos is famous in LA. He's famous in New York. I know Mark Garagos because he represents my brother, and we'll talk about that later, but I've at least followed Mark before that. Mark Garagos is, in my opinion, he is the last criminal defense lawyer that you can go to who's actually going to fight for you. The way the system is set up is that it really is just set up to require you to plead guilty to craziness because you can't, A, risk it, B, you can't afford to proceed. Mark Garagos is one of the last, if not the last. And Mark was charged as accomplice after the fact. There's this guy, Mike Avenatti. You remember him? He was the big guy suing. He represented Stormy Daniels. Turns out Mr. Avenatti was stealing money from his clients and things like that. Mark Garagos is a friend of Mike Avenatti. Avenatti was charged with trying to extort Nike for $20 million. Mark Garagos was a co-counsel on the case. Now, co-counsel on the case usually means you're representing one party of a group. There'll be 3 or 4 people. Each person generally needs an attorney. Mark Garagos, I think that was the situation, but Avenatti was caught trying to extort Nike. He's on tape, I think, making some pretty crazy statements. And lo and behold, they indict Avenatti, but they indict Avenatti by name. They indict Mark Garagos by saying he was an accomplice or an unindicted co-conspirator. That's the way, unindicted co-conspirators. They then tell the press who exactly the unindicted co-conspirator is. But in this case, they said it was Mark Garagos, who there's not a fucking shred of evidence that he had any involvement in anything Avenatti was doing. It was a hack job directed against Mark Garagos. He's it. There's no one else. If you're of color in California, there's no one else you can turn to. Mark Garagos tells the truth about multiple situations. He is amazing, and they indict him as a co-conspirator with Avenatti for a $20 million scheme. Mark Garagos is worth at least $50 million. Mark Garagos does not need more money. Mark Garagos isn't an idiot. Mark Garagos it's absurd. And yet they indict him as an unindicted co-conspirator, throw his name out there, trash this guy. Not a shred of evidence that he had any involvement with Avenatti other than being co-counsel. But as you'll see, that's good enough if you want to destroy somebody. Mark Garagos is just another example of why he was targeted. He is one of the few criminal defense lawyers that tells the truth. During the Trayvon Martin case, I think it was, and Mark had, there's 3 or 4 of these that he's been on, and he pointed out, he said, this is going to be a not guilty because they only have like 2 African Americans on the jury. They did exactly what he said. They came back to him, and he says, again, this was obvious from the moment you picked the jury. Part of the problem that happens is that in order for the justice system and for the police and the prosecutors and the bar associations to get away with tricking us, you have to kill the messenger. You have to. You can't have someone like Mark Garagos saying, I can tell you whether there's going to be a guilty verdict or not by doing nothing other than looking at the jury. Because what it does is it shows how just fundamentally flawed it is. So that's what they came after. They've come after Mark for everything, but this Avenatti thing is crazy. He might be worth $100 million. It's just one of these things. And Mark Garagos has represented some of the most powerful people in the world. I think if he was going to go down, it wouldn't be for trying to extort Nike. It's crazy.
He doesn't even wear Nike.
He probably doesn't. He's an Adidas dude, man. It's sad though. And this one thing I was asking my brother Matthew, we're going to talk about. I don't there are so few criminal defense lawyers that are out there today who will actually fight for their clients. But Mark Garagos is one of the last guys who will actually fight for people. And it's becoming troubling. If you are of color or if you are poor, there are so few lawyers who will. Alan Jackson, Caucasian guy, is a great dude. I like Alan. Alan helped me and Zach on our marijuana case.
Oh, yeah.
He said it was cool. We went and met with him. This is a great story. And I said, Alan, my brother would recommend him. I said, hey, can you help us? Because we've got this great business. And Alan Jackson said, well, first of all, you can't afford me. But what's cool about it, he said, but here's what I'm going to do. I think you guys got a good deal. I love your license. I love where you're at. And as God is my witness, he took out his fucking business card and he said, here's my business card. Here's my cell phone number, writes it on the back and says, tell your employees if they get arrested or pulled over or they show up at the store to call me and I will represent them. That is, Alan Jackson, literally, he did Kevin Spacey's case, by example. He had this story in one of his magazines about representing Saudi princes. But it was cool, man. He was like, dude, yeah. I like what you guys are doing. It's cool. And he did that. He didn't charge us a penny. But other than Alan Jackson, Mark Garagos, I don't know anyone else. The only other person I know is my brother. And fortunately, my brother's not making as much as Alan Jackson or Garagos. But people need to understand that the Shakespeare quote, it was meant as a control piece. It was meant as a process by which government could take over your lives. And that's what's happening. That's Mark, and he's great. He's a funny dude, too. The reason I know so much about Mark is Mark represents my brother. My brother is Matthew Fletcher. Matthew Fletcher is, he's great. If you are African-American or Latino in LA, he is the only person who's going to walk into court and try a case for you. He was Suge Knight's lawyer. Matthew and I grew up in Linwood. Go Knights. And went to Hostler, and we went to school with Suge Knight. Matthew has worked with Suge before, wasn't involved in the business stuff, but when Suge ran over the dude in the parking lot, Suge called Matthew, and Matthew came and helped. And this is one of the craziest situations you've ever seen. Matthew was arrested in court, walked down the corridor at Long Beach Courthouse, handcuffed and charged with conspiracy to commit murder or something crazy like that. And the basis for it was they had been tape recording all of the attorneys. Now, I know you in America, you think that the court system and the police don't listen to your calls with attorneys. Tape recording every phone call Matthew and the 5 other lawyers had with Suge Knight, secretly tape recording them. And when Matthew, and what happens with Suge is multiple lawyers come on and they leave. Matthew came on at the end and Matthew said, okay, we'll go try this case. And part of what he had said was, and you're going to see, we're going to play you the TMZ tape. The truth is this, and there's never a question about it. Suge Knight, who frankly is not a nice person, but this one, they should have built a statue for him. These guys were trying to kill him. It's literally, you'll see on the TMZ tape, Suge backs up, runs the guy over, and then leaves and runs the guy over again. He's trying to get out. This Harvey Levin of TMZ said, this is the first time ever the LA County Prosecutor's Office has suggested a black guy taking something, put him in his belt, isn't a gun. And so they go over, and literally the dude who had his gun, he's laying on the ground like this. Dude walks over, takes what is clearly a gun, takes it, sticks it in his waist. They said that wasn't a gun. They said it was a wallet, probably. And so here's the other part of it. There's a motorcycle gang in Compton, and it's not a gang. It's a bunch of old dudes trying to be tough. But multiple videos exist, as we understand it, of these guys videotaping the shooting. And it was clear that this was a hit on Suge Knight. No question about it. And there's videos of this thing. And so we had the one video. And so Matthew told Shug, he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a reward out in the street to get the videos from the motorcycle dudes. There's no question that was the conversation. It was clear as day. The LA County Prosecutor's Office, Jackie Lacey's African-American sister they got, whose primary job was to indict and arrest black people and brown people, had indicted my brother based on grand jury testimony because they said he was trying to bribe witnesses to lie about what happened. The tape just says, we just want these videotapes of this incident. Clear as day. They use that, and they use the testimony from an LA cop, literally an LA County detective who is charged with threatening to kill a witness on video. Caught threatening to kill a witness. They use that to indict my brother, all by secret grand jury. And there were two African-American jurors on the team, jurors on the defense team. You'll find this hard to believe. They only indicted the African-American guys. And one of them it's shunning. They didn't, for example, they didn't indict Tom Mesereau, who was his lawyer. They didn't invite, I think his name was Schwartz. And so they indicted Matthew for offering to bribe witnesses by saying, we're gonna get the tape recording from the motorcycle gang. And the second thing they indicted him for is they said that he sold the videotape to TMZ. No, he gave the videotape to TMZ that shows Suge Knight running over the guy who's laying there dead with the gun in his hand. And they said, Matthew leaked that to TMZ, and that's what they indicted him for. The truth was, as they knew, one of the Caucasian lawyers sold the tape to TMZ. But they didn't charge the Caucasian guy who sold the tape to TMZ. But that's fine. The reason they do that is because Matthew was going to go to trial. What they do, what the police department does, what the prosecutor's office does, and what the California bar and other bar associations allow is you can target attorneys who fight for black and brown people. You can target them. We will help you. It's what happens. And that's what, in Jaye's case, it's similar, but in Matthew's case, it's stunning. And just to prove a point, they got Matthew off of the case. They indicted him, marched him out, charged him $1 million bond. And again, because he said we're going to get the videotapes of the people who confirmed that Suge Knight ran over the guy laying there dead with a gun in his hand. But they're trying to bribe that witness. They do that because Suge Knight could not have been convicted in a million years. It was, again, he is largely a piece of shit, understood, not saying he's not, but in this situation, he was surrounded, as I like to say, by three African-American guys, one with a gun, and suddenly he's a bad guy. If he were white, they'd put him on a wall somewhere. But it was literally, these guys they're trying to kill him. And so by getting Matthew off the case, they got someone else on the case. And this is what happens every single time. They get a public defender, an African-American public defender, very effeminate, very passive. And guess what he did? He got Suge Knight to plead to 28 years. Oh. Suge Knight's 53 years old, pled him to 28 years, health issues, diabetes. No competent lawyer in the world would plead a client to 28 years when you have video of the guy he ran over with a gun. Not only that, there's also video of the kids showing up and asking for his dad's gun at the police department, asking for the dad's gun, but there was no gun involved. They got rid of Matthew. They indicted this other lawyer who was stupid because he was taking bribes. Matthew wasn't taking bribes. Indict him, get him off the case. They get the effeminate public defender who has to beg for appointments. That's how it works, is that if you want to get appointed to a case, you've got to be their kind of guy or they won't appoint you. So they appoint the effeminate African-American guy who pleads his client to 28 years in state prison with diabetes, going blind. That's what they pled him to. They do that to control who we are and what we are, and it happens every single day. Every day. It's It's horrifying. My brother also, we just found out that the sheriff's department, they were trying to set him up. So they sent people to hire him and saying, hey, we'll give you $2,500 and heroin. And Matthew's just like,
Deal.
That's what I say. You should have taken the heroin.
Come on.
He's like, yeah, I don't. Actually, what he says is, first of all, if I wanted heroin, Matthew's represented some of the biggest people in the world. He's, the Mexican mafia. He's all of them. He's like, if I wanted heroin, I can get pounds of heroin.
Better than what you have.
Yeah, your heroin is shit. And Matthew's just like, I don't play that game. Nope, I'm good. It's either cash or not. And we found out last week that, by the way, yes, the sheriff's department. And here's the great thing about it is, and what the LA County prosecutor's office said, they say, but this was not DA approved, meaning the district attorney didn't approve it. And which I then said, so the sheriff's officer's driving down the street with heroin in his car and cash in his car, but that's not illegal. Yeah. See, a lot of people would be concerned about that because a lot of innocent people of color end up being charged with heroin possession and cash, but it's okay for the LA County Sheriff's Department, which, by the way, cannot investigate crimes. They can't set people up. Literally on tape trying to get my brother to accept heroin in payment, and it's appalling.
Yeah,
it's amazing. And what's crazy is that they get away with it, but Matthew isn't the only one. They've systematically gotten rid of person after person who's going to fight for people of color. It's devastating. So we're gonna, and that's why Jai's case was interesting in the sense that it's all on video. Now, admittedly, he's not laying on the ground with a gun in his hand dead, but it's on video, and that's what we have. We're going to spend a lot more time on the justice system and things like that. I know about this because my law license was suspended 20 years ago because I had allegedly, again, did shit. It's like, I never fought a lawsuit in my life. They literally spent $1 million, couldn't get one person to come and say, yeah, Michael Fletcher did this. They're like, they made up. And so they put on one witness at our hearing, but I couldn't cross-examine her, couldn't put on evidence. We had to just sit there. It was funny. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, I don't think this is due process. But let her go. That's fine. It's fine. We'll trust you guys. And this isn't about me. But one of the reasons I want to do this podcast is that we're going to make things better. And if we do not find a way to hold judges accountable, hold lawyers accountable who violate their oaths, if we don't find a way to, for example, allow regular people, just regular, teacher A, teacher B, we're married, we're getting divorced. If we don't find a way to allow families to get divorced and leave with some assets, its system's never going to work. They are exploiting you. The family law courts, they're stunning. This is my last story in family law. So I had one of my mini lawyers, she said, Michael, we'd spent like $18,000 doing discovery. And I'm like, we have a prenuptial agreement. It was like Tom Cruise's old prenup. I'm like, I think it's pretty good. And so we spent like $18,000 doing discovery. And she said, well, we need this amount more. I'm like, more for what? She goes, well, we need to finish discovery. And I'm like, well, why don't we just have a trial? She goes, no, here's what you don't understand. In civil law, you do discovery and then you have a trial. In family law, we do discovery and then we settle it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why don't we just settle it before we do discovery? It was appalling. I mean, I spent personally hundreds of thousands of dollars. It just destroys people. And we're going to have some people on and have them talk about how it makes you feel to be put in a position of selling your house or losing your children. It happens every day, and the court system lets them get away with it. They let them get away with it. So that's that.
In family court, have you ever seen somebody represent themselves and win?
I represented myself, and it was 10 days, and they kind of said, okay, you don't... Well, the great part of my representing yourself and winning thing was we were it was greatest because I was pointing out, I was like, I'm not paying you anything because you took $157,000 and we have it proved in account. And my ex-wife and her lawyer came in, and this was great. They said, Judge, we can get this case settled because Mr. Fletcher says that his ex-wife took $150,000, but we can prove that it was given during the marriage. And the judge says, well, that makes sense. Would that resolve things, Mr. Fletcher? No, but okay, let's see it. So they gave me these bank records. I'm looking through it. And the judge says, does that solve it, Mr. Fletcher? I go, no. The problem with this is it's a different account. It's a different account with $174,000. So that's on top of the 150. So we're at $324,000. And they're just like, oh, judge says, well, I guess we're going to have a trial then. And then he said, the other best one from it was, this was the first judge we had was a female. And she said that under California law, if you engage in domestic violence, you can't have custody. I walked in, I pointed out that my ex-wife, her own psychiatrist said she used to punch me, kick me, slap me. And the judge says, she says, well, I don't understand how that could have hurt you because she's so small. I said, there you go.
Suck it up.
Yeah, I sat there and I looked at her, and this was hilarious. I then just let this lady have it. And it was crazy because before I got there was this young dude, and he was a good looking dude, and he was representing himself just getting killed. And I just watched it, and then they had to take a break, and they called me up. And then I just let her have it. I said, you know what? There are people who need you to be fair. There are people that need you to follow the law, and you aren't doing it, and you're destroying people's lives, and this, and this. And we walked out for lunch, and the guy walks up to me. It's going to make me cry. He says, thank you for saying that for me. Because they ran this. I mean, he's like, I have to live at home. I'm paying for both of her lawyers. I don't have a lawyer. Yeah. And I'm paying for both of her lawyers. It happens every day. And what's crazy about it is there's not even a pretense of being fair. We can do this forever. There's this another, I remember this when my brother was representing me at court, hearing number 800. Yeah. And there was a brother in front of us, and he had some long dreads, just a good looking dude. And me and my brother are laughing, and he's a musician. We're like, I bet he's not dating much. And this is in front of the judge we're going in front of, and he's objecting to his ex-wife having visitation with his two kids. Mm-hmm. And the judge says, well, it's so important that they spend time with their mother. And the musician, good-looking musician, not a lawyer, says, well, Judge, the last time that happened, she took my kids to England and changed their names. So now... Under any scenario, that would prevent. Now, of course, he's of color, by the way. And under any scenario, that would prevent her from having custody. And the judge says, well, technically, she changed their first names. She didn't change them. She made their first names their last names and their last names their first name and moved to England. And the guy said, it's the same thing. Well, we've got to unite them. And it was just, you're sitting there going, for real? Mm-hmm. It happens every day. It was funny because again, it's your kids and you just want to get it done. I called this lawyer who I kind of knew. He used to be a plaintiff's lawyer. And I said, man, listen, I need a real lawyer. And he said, Michael, let me tell you this. He said, I used to do plaintiff's work and it was hard. He said, I got into family law and it was shooting fish in the barrel. He says the lawyers are horrible. The judges are horrible. He says, I make a lot of money. He said, I won't even take a case unless you write me a $100,000 retainer that has to be replenished anytime it drops under 50. Yeah. And I just won't take a case in Long Beach because it's so corrupt. I mean, it's amazing what they're confronted with and where do you go?
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of it has to be like, some people aren't even looking for legal counsel. They're more looking for like a person to complain to, like with their family court. It's just like, I need someone to be on my side, and I'll pay anything. Well,
and there are some people that can do that, but I tell you what, the sad again, it's the homicide cop who literally. I mean, it's funny because you have to look back in retrospect, but you're like, this guy, I mean, and I remember he said, he goes, I investigate homicides. Sometimes I have to leave. Yeah. And I'm just like, and it was heartbreaking, but it was also just disturbing. I mean, it's just like, so when you got a judge who has a dude, and what it really comes down to, and again, this is just, if you're a father and you want custody of your children, they treat you like a pedophile. I mean, it's just like, yeah, I'm part of my kid's life. The guy was like, 2's not more than 3. And I remember saying, you're right, 2's not more than 3. Yeah. It's the kind of shit they make you do. Well, this has been a Mark Samuel Media production.
There you go.
In conjunction with the Laugh Factory, both multicultural entities. Hey, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're going to do a lot of cool stuff. We're going to do a series on Suge Knight and his case, and because I want to walk you through it and to see it, because it's fascinating to see what happens when the system decides you're a bad guy. We are absolutely going to get a comic on here, or 2 or 3. We appreciate you. We really do. We're doing some cool stuff. So thank you. And we'll see you next week.
The Fletch Cast. It's genetics.